On this podcast, we'll be talking about if Macbeth deserves sympathy for his murderous deeds, and if it's Macbeth to blame for his own death, and also the murder of Duncan and any other murders being justifiable.
All these questions are going to be talked about with your hosts today, Emma and Novalee. Alright, let's get into it and learn just what these questions about the story of Macbeth are asking us.
The first question is, does Macbeth deserve sympathy for his murderous deeds?
Well, with anybody's opinion, I feel like anyone would say that he does not deserve sympathy, because murder is murder. If you murder someone, that's taking someone else's life, and no one really deserves sympathy for taking someone else's life.
Exactly. And he murdered Duncan for greed because he wanted the power to be king.
Such a greedy man.
Agreed.
Well, if we're talking about if he does deserve sympathy, why does he deserve sympathy though? Like, if that, from that viewpoint, and such like that.
Probably because in the prophecy the witches gave him, it told him that he will be king, but they didn't tell him that he needed to commit counts of murder to stay king.
Yeah, exactly. The witches really pressured him, and, I mean, you know, and Lady Macbeth pressured him the most, and the witches gave him the idea of murdering Duncan. They didn't say that he needed to murder other people. And so his murderous deeds are really just don't deserve sympathy because it's murder.
The next question is Macbeth to blame for his own death?
Well, his ambition and hunger for power is his fault, really. He's a grown man, and he can choose what he does. And his weakness, he does have a weakness, and that weakness is being persuaded by others easily. And that's kind of what happened. But he is to blame for his own death because he murdered multiple people. That's a lot of guilt, but it was for greedy things and wanting to be king, and that just eventually led to his own death, and that's how that was in the story.
The prophecy the witches gave Macbeth was no man born of woman can harm him, or stop him. And his own mind tortured him for killing Duncan.
Yeah. And while Lady Macbeth didn't murder anyone, though she aided Macbeth with this murder. Eventually, that was random, sorry, anyway, interruptions. She aided Macbeth with the murder, eventually putting the blood on her own hands by, so she put the murder, she had blood on her hands, the actual blood of Duncan, because she took those 2 daggers he was brutally murdered with and set them with the guards so that they would be blamed for the murder and Macbeth would get away with it, and so Macbeth would be king and Lady Macbeth would be queen.
And Lady Macbeth liked the idea of being queen because she thought it would be cool and to be queen, but all at the end it ended up just driving her crazy.
Yeah, and didn't she get murdered? Or was that a thing? Did she get murdered?
I'm not sure about the answer to that question.
I'm pretty sure her throat got cut off, like, just because of, well, she went crazy. She started speaking in her sleep, started confessing to random things, and I'm pretty sure her son got murdered, and then Lady Macbeth got murdered, and then the news went to Macbeth, and he was just outraged. He was wow. Yep.
And I believe at that point in the story that Macbeth realized that other people were slowly starting to catch on to his secret.
Yeah, and slowly being mad at him and for his murderous deeds that he committed. And he did murder quite a bit of people. And he had power before he became king. He was just greedy for more and wanted more power.
The ambition and hunger for power is his fault and means for his downfall.
He let all of his temptations just take over, and I really believe that he is to blame for his own death. In the end of the story, he's just to blame for it.
He didn't have to follow the prophecy of killing people, and well, the prophecy was not to kill people, but it involved it. But Macbeth still proceeded that if anyone got in his way, that they would also be murdered.
Yeah. I agree. It's true.
What is the murder of Duncan and any other murders justifiable?
Well, all of his murders were for greed and for power, not for self-defense. You see, if it was for self-defense, that would have been more justifiable, and actually justifiable, because what he did was not justifiable. It was not in self-defense. No one was trying to kill him or harm him in any way, but he went and killed for greed and power, which is just not justifiable.
Although Lady Macbeth didn't murder anyone, throughout the story, she aided Macbeth with the murders of the king.
And we already talked about this, but she had drove herself mad. And, well, that's not really the justifiable. That's not really about this question. So let's go back to talking about this question. Duncan was really just minding his business, being king, and wanting his sons to have the throne after him. And while Macbeth just wanted to be king. And that's not justifiable. Duncan was doing nothing wrong. Was he doing anything wrong?
No. Duncan was just doing his stuff as the king and making sure that his kingdom was peaceful.
Yeah. And Macbeth and Lady Macbeth broke that peace, and the witches, the evil witches, with their prophecy, just really added on to all of it. And really, that's that.
And the murders, again, weren't justifiable because, I mean, like you said, everyone was just minding their business. Macbeth killed the king.
And then, yeah, like, bam, killed king.
And he proceeded to murder everyone that got in his way.
Yeah. So really, in the end of the story, it's just... yeah. That's all I have to say.
In the conclusion, he deserves no sympathy. Him, the witches, and Lady Macbeth all have the blame in the king's death.
Yeah, and mainly Macbeth has the blame for that. He really... that's... yeah. Duncan shouldn't have been murdered. It isn't justified at all. Like, Duncan's murder isn't justified.
See you later on the Greedy Macbeth.
Okay, goodbye.